Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am thrilled to have our friend Julie Kelly, who's an advisor at Edward Jones and also a principal at Edward Jones. And thanks for being on the show, Julie. Appreciate it.
Hey, looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, well, we've sort of had this conversation before, and I will apologize ahead of time, depending on how much we can edit out for Dogmageddon. If my dogs start barking furiously, I'm going to jump up and close the door. But this is the
Mhm.
world we live in. This is the amazing budget that we have here at AdvisorHub for this. So, thanks for being on the show. We had a really good conversation at our women's event, which I'm sure you recall. So that was pretty good. It was a great event. We had a couple hundred women there, and you and I talked, and I kind of want to reprise that. We talked a lot about uh, really important topic, which I think for all advisors, which is sort of time management, right? I mean, that's sort of the essence of it. How and if you can create efficiencies with time management, how a client you work with your clients is better, you work with your family is better, your work on work is better. So I just think we should talk about that, but you've kind of come to some conclusions around that. And before we get there, let's talk a little bit about um, how you got into business and how you sort of came up with these principles that you use for time management. But let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. Originally I started the business working for two different investment firms, where I was coaching and training financial advisors. And through that experience, I realized I wanted to stop traveling every single day and being on planes. And that eventually brought me to Edward Jones because I realized there were not that many females in the financial industry as financial advisors. And I realized as well that if I could really run a very highly ethical business where I really focused on building deep relationships with clients, that I would be pretty successful as a female. So came over to the business in 2010 and been running my practice at Edward Jones over the last 15 years. And it's been an absolute blessing. I think with hard work and my drive that is innate inside, I was able to have a large amount of success very early on in the career. But that also brought challenges because I was trying to grow a family as well. So I had three children in 4 years while building a business. We now manage about $500 million, and we built that up since we started in the business about 15 years ago. So you can imagine the type of growth that brings, with the complexity of also balancing a family and a husband and just keeping everybody happy.
Well, hard to do. But there must have been to develop this kind of program, you must have been feeling it, right? There must have been some kind of crisis with all that because 500 million, three kids, it's a lot going on. At which point did you say, I've got to fix this or I've got to change the dynamic a little bit?
Yeah. So not having a huge number of males in the industry or females, excuse me, in the industry to begin with, I really was trying to seek out an opportunity to connect with other women who had been through what I've been through. I was very blessed at Edward Jones. They have a huge number of female mentorship programs and opportunities. And so that was kind of where
Including
I
including
started.
including Penny,
Yes.
who's running
Yeah.
this program. So that's all
Yeah.
good.
So Penny and one of my dear mentors, Patty, who's a former partner for Edward Jones, who's now retired, but really kind of reached out to them to try to understand, like, how do you do this all successfully and not feel guilt while doing so? And
Guilt is
that's,
a key thing because that I mean that cuts across, everybody, right? Especially
yeah.
today, even men want to spend more time with their families if they can. And there's just you just feel guilty and
Yep,
I'm
that's
Italian, so I
exactly
feel
what, and I
guilty
think
all
I
the
think it's very true. Men do too. So when I was with my kids, I was feeling guilty to my clients. When I was with my clients, I was feeling guilty to my kids. And when I'm with one of those two, I was feeling guilty to my husband, right? So it's this feeling of like you can never keep everybody satisfied. And that is when I got connected with this mentor of mine, as well as a psychologist at Edward Jones. Our firm provided that opportunity for me, just given the size and the growth of the practice. And I was taking on some leadership responsibility. And he asked me one day, like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, Gil, I've got to get through this. If I'm going to survive another 20 years, I can't be going through every motion of every day feeling like I'm disappointing somebody. And at that time, it was that concept of I was not able to leave the office ever feeling like I had had a successful day. Like there was always more I could do.
right. Always something in one of those buckets is going to be left behind.
Yeah, that. And then it was the guilt of the 7-year-old child just wanting more and more of mom's time. So they gave me a bunch of tools, which I'd be glad to share a couple of them here today to just help me equip like how to tackle that, how to feel like you've had a successful day and you can check off and go home and then be present with your kids. And then also, how do you work through the hurdle when you've got a young child who
Right.
just wants more of your time?
Well, that's interesting because that's such a, I love making lists every day. So I've always done it, but you bring up a good point. What do you put on the list? And so
Yeah.
what do how do you figure out what's doable today? And so I guess I've kind of evolved into, I make this list and I kind of give myself the week to get through it. And I know what the priorities are on my list and kind of what has to get done today. But it's funny because Friday turns out to be a day where I'm doing a lot of follow-up to make sure I get stuff done. So it's the way you look at the list that means something too, right? So you had to figure out some stuff you have to do today, right? There's work you just have to do. So
Yeah.
how did you figure that out?
I think for me, what they were trying to get me to do is think bigger picture about this long-term journey that we're all on. And the psychologist said, what I want you to do is I want you to think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like what is success to you, Julie?
Mm.
And he had me define it, 3 or 4 things, like what was success, both personal and professional. And then he said, I want you to write down 2 to 3 things every day that you could measure that would tie and lead to influencing those longer term goals you have. So the example I would just give is I said I wanted to be, ranked within Barron's one day. I wanted to also have, a practice at a certain level of revenue production. I also wanted to have a marriage that stayed healthy and still great. And then I wanted my kids to remember that I was extremely attentive to their needs and their wants, and I was there for everything almost everything. And then he said, okay, well, then what are 2 to 3 things every day
By the way,
you
that's a
could
pretty
measure?
aggressive list. That
It
list
is
is
aggressive,
that's
right?
pretty
But we got
aggressive.
to
A
shoot
lot
for
of
the
great things.
stars.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You
yeah.
started in a
And
big
so
way.
I created those things like a one to do. So, like, one of the things was if I wanted to grow my business a certain level, I said, I need to be able to say that every day I engaged with 2 to 3 prospects every day, no matter what. And then I had to, if I wanted to have that same successful practice, I had to engage with at least 10 clients a day, because that's the existing clients. So the growth of the business, but the existing clients. And I said I wanted to leave by 4 every day. If I left by 4, that meant I was there and present for my children for all their activities. And then make sure I dropped a phone call to my husband at least once a day to say hello, because I can just put my head down. And if I did those simple things, what I realized was like, that's a darn successful day.
Yeah.
So we get lost in this lengthy list of, 52 things, which yes, it's always going to be there. But can you look back
It's
and say you did
overwhelming.
the basic things?
It's overwhelming when you try to look at that. I mean, just
It
try to
is.
look at that list in a time. It's overwhelming.
Yes, it
It's a
is.
lot of stuff.
So that just kind of helped me boil it down to a more simplistic lens of like, you're working towards the longer term goals that are going to ultimately make you feel fulfilled.
Right. And so it's a way of viewing daily success, right? And that makes you then sort of with things that are actually actionable and you're able to check them off. And
Mhm.
it also kind of assuages some of the guilt, I'm assuming, because you're going down every road every day. You're taking a little step down each path.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's great. Now, those are great things to be able to do, but I also know that, in order to even find the time for that with a $500 million business, and you're the boss of that, and as the wife, it's the heart of the family, the boss of the family too. So how do you, what do you do? Because I know you're a technology driven person too. So there's got to be ways to create efficiencies to even create the time to do those things.
Yeah. I think we chatted about this at the conference, but one of the biggest things I try to tell people that is that it's so critical for us to slow down to speed up. And what I realized was this is a capacity game. It's all about creating capacity in the practice. And you get to choose as the advisor what you do with that capacity that you've created. You can put it into your family, you can put it back into the business. So there were a couple of very intentional things that we did. And we've got some programs at our firm that have kind of like helped me analyze this. But number one is really looking at your team. So looking at your team structure and figuring out, do you have enough people on board? I realized very quickly we were at max capacity. We needed to bring on more people. So we brought on an associate financial advisor. We call him an AFA at Edward Jones. And then we brought an additional client support team member and really analyzed like, what is their role clarity and what are they going to take care of? So that was extremely valuable. We also we're looking at a couple of different things right now. And it's still to this day, we analyze it every year. We're looking at the asset management process. So how are we managing money to create capacity, right? So do I have to be involved in everything, or can we get some of it a little bit more automated through our more advanced platforms and programs that we have? And then a big reflection too, I think is, and when we started the business, we kind of gave the same service model to everybody. But the reality is their needs are different. And so reassessing, like, what is that service model you have in place for your clients? And is it truly the most effective based off the client's needs? When we looked through those three things, like role clarity, do we have enough bodies in the office, asset management approach, and then service model, we found very quickly that there were a huge amount of opportunities to create capacity in that space. And we try to review that every year to
Yeah.
reflect if there are changes that we need to make.
I wonder, so, advisors are typically, the stuff they don't do well on average. They don't like to, and they want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't want to invest in their business when it comes to investing actual money, right? They get cheap with it, or
Right.
they could do it. Or what happens almost all the time is they ham and egg it, right? It's like, oh, let's just go another week, we'll do it. Now, I'm wondering, that talk with the psychiatrist, the putting the stuff down, organizing your day into the goals you wanted to hit that day. Did that come first and then give you clarity? Because you seem pretty organized anyway.
Yeah.
But you just be able to do that seems like, boy, that's you got to be able to take a step back just to look at your business in that way, right? And then add all that stuff. So did that come first, or what?
Say it was kind of the trifecta effect that it was going on at the exact same time. So I was having conversations with a psychologist, but then my team is also extremely intentional about visiting together every week as well as throughout the year. So every week on Monday, we have a conversation as a team where we do a branch team meeting where we reflect on like, where are we now? Where are we trying to go? We look at any processes that need to be changed. And then at the end of every year, we take an entire day every year at the end of the year and review all of our SOPs, all of our role clarity. And we really shut it down and analyze, like, do we collectively agree as a team that this is the best way it should be done as we go into the following calendar year, and what changes can we make? So that was kind of accompanying the conversation with the psychologist at the same time. And then full transparency, Edward Jones gives a lot of business coaching programs, which are amazing.
Yeah, I was
So
just going to ask, what resources at Edward Jones do you leverage too to get all this stuff done? Because
we have a
a lot of
huge
guys are
amount of,
on their own. There are RIAs who are
yeah,
sitting by themselves. They have no
right.
resources to do, and there are people at big firms where they feel like nobody cares about me, right? No one's going to help me with stuff. But to do this, you must be pulling in resources from
Yeah.
across.
So we have a huge amount of opportunities at Edward Jones to participate in various different coaching programs, whether they be internal or external coaching programs. And so I felt this pressure that we've been talking about of like, I'm going to have to throw a surrender flag soon because I can't keep up with this. And that's when we engaged with a coaching program within Edward Jones and did monthly coaching calls. So a lot of it is things that we know we need to do, but we need to be held accountable to it. And that's where really I think those coaching programs become extremely helpful, is they hold you accountable. So you're going to get back on that Zoom in 30 days and have to report, what changes did you make? And that's really ultimately what helped me stop kicking the can down the road, because as I said, it is hard sometimes to make those changes.
Oh, accountability is the key, I think, and it's another piece. An entrepreneurial advisor, really has to make themselves accountable, and it's perfectly fine to bring in outside, resources. I think you also think, oh, I'll be accountable by myself. It's pretty hard when you're running a $500 million business to be that way.
Key there though, Tony, too, is, and I would say this even with the work-life balance side of it, lean on your team. Like, I know what my weaknesses are, and that is I say yes to everything. So my team is really good at saying no for me. And then I know who on my team is good at, raising something to my attention that maybe I'm going to be like, we can push that off. And they're very stern with me, like, no, we can't push it off. So I have somebody on my team that would hold me accountable to like, hey, when are we going to explore or start interviewing somebody to come onto the team, right? So I think it's really important we lean on our team. Like, my team will not schedule anybody after 4 p.m. because they know that interferes with the time with the kids. My team also knows that if somebody requests something after 4 p.m., we have verbiage that we use with clients to help clients realize that to request a 6 o'clock meeting with Julie is kind of crazy, right? Like, she's got a
Right.
family and 3 kids. Like, she'll be willing to do it, but let us check with her. And the fact that she's going to have to arrange childcare, right? And then people start to realize, like, yeah, that's kind of an abnormal request for me to make of a woman who's growing a family with a
And
business.
the other thing is that there are sometimes dual benefits. I mean, if you're going to a kid's play, you're meeting prospects. If you're going to, on the side of the hockey game is, parents, other parents, and Yeah, your kid's in private school, then it's
Always
a
business
pretty good advice.
opportunities everywhere, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think you just organize your life in that way. So so the guilt is totally gone, or just calm down, or
It's calmed down to the point that I give myself grace. And there's a
yeah.
book that I shared with the group in New York City when we were chatting that I would share with anybody to read. It's specifically written for women, but I really think anybody can read it. And it's the book that is called I Know How She Does It by Laura Vanderkam. And it's basically how successful women make the most of their time. And I encourage women to read that book because I think the guilt will always be there. But what this book does is it teaches you grace. And it really kind of points out to you, like, you are doing a really good job. And I think particularly for individuals who think about time differently, like not just in the traditional, 8 to 5 hours. If you're somebody who thinks of time uniquely, which is what this book teaches you to do, like don't think of like just the traditional 8 to 5 hours. You'll give yourself a lot of grace and just realize you're doing a darn good job. And that's what I loved about that book. So no, it's never perfect. Yes, my kids still get frustrated when I can't be there for something. But
Yeah.
if I go back to the core of like what is success to me one day, and it is not that my 7-year-old thinks I'm a superstar today. It's instead when my 7-year-old walks down the aisle and gets married for the first time, what is she thinking about me? Right? About her, like, how is she thinking about mom and how mom raised her? So, really taking to that long-term perspective.
Yeah, that's super helpful. The next step here is AI, right? So that's coming, and I mean, you're like I said, a tech fan, big on creating capacity. Technically, for the team and for everybody else, AI ought to create more capacity. Obviously, there are challenges with it too, but what are you thinking of in terms of that now?
We're slowly looking into that. Obviously, should probably be doing it faster. There's the guilt, right? Um, one more thing to focus on. Where we're trying to leverage it is in a lot of our communication with clients. So, for example, if we need to send out a pretty consistent communication message that we want to send to multiple clients, that we wanted to have a certain message or a certain tone to it, and we want to tie it to maybe our value proposition in our office, instead of sitting there trying to write it ourselves, as an example, really leaning on the AI capabilities that we have within our firm itself and helping us build out some of that messaging and communication. So that's where we've been leveraging it. And we're in the process of expanding to how can we leverage the AI that we have within Edward Jones and marry that with our new relationship management tool, which we are using, which is Salesforce, and really leveraging that to create capacity when it comes to contacts and ideas and things to implement with clients and kind of marrying the two there.
So, just a couple, just some final things on because we talked about advisors not wanting to, invest in their businesses, but another challenge is sometimes the things that make you a good advisor don't make you a good manager, or sometimes it's actually the opposite, right? So team management and a difficult thing. How do you manage growth, and how do you manage people's aspirations, their guilt, right? Because they've all now you have a team that seems pretty well integrated, but they've got egos and people. When you manage people, you got to kind of figure out, well, what can they do and what they can't do. So how did you come to that, and how do you handle that? Is it all hiring now, and because you work it up front, or do you have a way to let people grow into positions? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer that in a few ways. Number one, I'll say when it comes to the true management of a team and making it work well, what was game changing for our team was when we were going through a coaching program, a partner we were working with had us all do the DISC assessment. Which is a great assessment to assess like where's our natural behavior lying. No surprise, I'm the D, I'm the driver. But I can be the I, which is the influencer, which is the person that is very engaging, doing things like this, right? But those things do drain me over time. And so understanding what were my team's natural strengths and where they performed best was really helpful. But it also helped me understand like why sometimes when I gave a certain assignment to somebody, it just was like not going well. And so we reassessed again role clarity as a result of those kind of assessments that we did. So I think those types of exercises are extremely valuable in understanding kind of like what are people's, it goes back to that whole like what's somebody's like superpower, but also like what's their love language. Like I'm not a good words of affirmation person. I don't love throwing out commands of success to people, but I know it's something I need to do because I have team members who have that. So I
But
just think it's awareness.
yeah, and role clarity is is key. You get,
Huge.
you put somebody in the wrong position, they're unhappy, you're unhappy, the clients are unhappy. It can turn into, and you see, advisors push people into roles out of necessity. I need somebody create these packages, and you have to do it. They're not good at it. The other person is, they're just not.
Yeah. And I think that's where that year-end meeting is really valuable, Tony, to any team member, because it's a team meeting. It's not run by me. It's a collective meeting run by the entire team. And we go through the role clarity. And that is the opportunity for somebody to raise their hand and be like, you know what? I really don't like doing that. Like I despise processing, let's just say insurance, right? And it gives the opportunity for us to reassess and realign people's work. And I think that that is extremely valuable because people change over time too. Somebody who
You've
likes to
got to
sit.
be open to it. You have
Yeah,
to be, the FA or the manager has to be open to hearing other people's ideas and
right.
thoughts on what they're doing. But a lot of people aren't. But you have to be.
Right. But I think that's being a good leader is you have to be willing to have people share, what's working and what's not working. And so we come down to like every SOP, we put it out, have an opportunity. Does everybody agree on it? Yep, that's the best way to do it. This is how we're going to do it going forward. We've all got agreement. Now we have accountability.
You know who's a great person? I don't know if do you know Patty Brennan at all?
I know of,
We
yes.
have to get to talk to her. She was a nurse. So I asked her, I said, we were talking like this, and I was talking about empathy. Nurses have a lot of empathy. And she's like, yeah, but not really. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, you have to have a lot of empathy. You want somebody to get better, but sometimes you got to give them a needle, and sometimes you got to give them medicine that they don't want to take, but it's for their own good. So you got to be empathetic, but you also have to do your job.
It's the key. And there are times that the team knows that sometimes Julie's just going to override some things.
Right.
Right? We get that opportunity as a leader. So I think it's just really bringing them into the decisions of the practice that helps create that, I think, that good energy within the group, and then really going through that role clarity and the standard operating procedures. I've always said professionals have processes, salesmen and women don't.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, I'm going to end it on that. That's a good note. I like that. I like that as a final pitch. Well, look, it was really appreciate you sharing these things with us, and I think it's really valuable for our audience, and I think everybody can get something out of it. So, really, thanks a lot for it, and we'll do it again.
Be here with you again. Great to see you again, Tony.